do a lot of concerts there. It's wonderful acoustic for singing. And then on the right there, that's the Basilica of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, the Mission Church on Mission Hill. And that's kind of a perfect example of one of those large, large Catholic churches where the sound just kind of hangs in the air and can certainly make for a special occasion. I believe I see that Tim, the music director there, has joined us. So welcome, Tim. And so those are some of the environments that I have come to know very well as both a musician and in worship. And would love to just take a pause here for conversation. And I'll stop sharing my screen for just a moment and open it up to the question for you all of, when you think of those more traditional spaces, what is your own kind of how would you describe like your relationship with the music in those spaces? Anyone have any thoughts they want to offer on that question?
I'll offer a thought. Cynthia here. I don't know if you can see me. Wait a second.
We can hear you. We can't see you. There we are.
There you are.
Hi.
There you are. In many spaces, the choir is up front, like at Trinity. And in the church I grew up in, the choir was up front, and the music would kind of be coming at us, facing us. And it's very different at King's Chapel. And thank goodness for the seats that we can turn around or we can look up and see the musicians. And in our church, I actually love it because I feel like it's almost angelic. It's like coming out over the congregation and flowing down upon all of us. And I feel like it's a very wonderful and spiritual experience. So
yeah,
that's
kind of like an otherworldly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like having the choir behind me because then I feel like we're all going in the same direction and I'm part of the choir. So it feels more like we're all together. They're not performing, we're all singing together. And I can I'll hone in on different voices when I'm trying to like tune in. And I sit in the same place all the time. So I'm very aware of because we don't have mics everywhere, which I love because I can tell where the sound is coming from. When Heinrich moves the choir around, where each person in the choir is, I have that sense of where they are in the space, which I really love having.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything they want to offer on Ray?
Having grown up in the, I guess you could call it a revivalist tradition once removed, which is a big choir across the front, sometimes with curtains and rheostat lighting and all this good stuff. And our intent was, I think, more to impress than to, I won't say it wasn't worshipful, but well, one irony was that we sang a lot of Negro spirituals, and this was in Little Rock during the integration problem. So it seemed so contradictory what we were doing, but the effect was this monolithic sound coming out at the audience. At King's is the other extreme, where a small group were in the back, and it's almost as though somebody mentioned wafting over the audience. We're part of the audience, part of the congregation, and this is our little segment, and this is our contribution, and everybody else gives their contributions in order or together. And so I find that, and then regarding the space in the Mission Church, which I've experienced several times, a lot of the bigger churches, I guess mostly Catholic and Episcopalian, the Gothic or other architecture adds to a sense of the music coming out of the building. Like it's coming out of the walls, bouncing everywhere. And that, to me, it can be either off-putting if you're trying to understand the words, or it can be very restorative and all encompassing. It's very supportive to me. I love hearing a good concert in a good big space like Mission Church or the cathedral, because it sort of wraps around me And I feel like it literally is coming from the building. So it's like the music, the acoustics are adding to the building and vice versa. And that's getting very complicated, so I'll shut up. Okay. But, anyway.
Yeah, no, I think these are all really great perspectives of just the way that music really does affect us differently depending on the architecture of the building, the placement of the choir, and as you kind of alluded to, Ray, the types of music that work in those spaces, like a place like Mission Church, where I've sung many times, it can be difficult to do very text heavy things because that text won't necessarily come out very crisply in the way that it does at a place like King's Chapel. But yeah, music has such a multifaceted role. It's an opportunity for reflection, and sometimes it's an opportunity for direct participation in terms of hymns. It elevates the text and the themes of the sermon. Um, and it can provide comfort or joy at particularly important moments, weddings and funerals, those sorts of things. Not necessarily all positive connotations, though. Like sometimes the music can have kind of a distancing effect, particularly when you think of those large Gothic churches and your choir loft is like way in the back, several stories up behind you, and sometimes that distance is, I think, a good effective thing, but sometimes it can be a little intimidating for the people below to want to sing along. That's been my experience trying to cantor in churches like that. I think when you're kind of caught in the middle of a cantor up there, an organist back there, and it can be a lot to kind of process when you're in the congregation in the middle of it all. So, but I'll go back to sharing my screen now. Heinrich, I'm not able to share my screen. I think you have to make me the host again.
Probably, yeah. Let's hope everybody is inside now. So, let's see. Assign co-host. Let's see how that works.
Oh.
Does that give you the power?
It does. Thank you.
Yay!
Empowerment. Yeah.
Learning on the job. Sorry about that.
That's all right. So in contrast, this is my worship space today. It's my little messy desk. And I'm sure you can kind of all relate. We all have kind of these little nooks in our homes that have become both work and play and worship and any number of things. And so as music makers in the church, this poses a ton of different kinds of challenges. And I know there's a few music directors on this call who can kind of add to my comments here. There's practical challenges and there's spiritual considerations. From a practical perspective, you do have the safety of the musicians. That's something we never really thought a ton about pre-COVID, at least not me personally. There's been a lot of adapting to new tools, which I'll talk a little bit about the tools I've been using in a bit. And to not only adapt very quickly, but to kind of maintain that professional quality sound that we're so used to in person. And also, working with kind of a different subset of musicians. At King's, we typically have a 16-member choir, and now that we're doing the virtual services, it's hard to record 16 members in advance of that. So we tend to be doing more quartets and duets, and that's been, I think, led to a lot of searching for new music that we don't necessarily have in our typical King's Chapel library. And then there's also the practical consideration of, well, how do you keep those musicians involved who aren't so tech savvy and can't, don't really have the tools to be able to record themselves from home, and it's important to keep those folks engaged. So I think that's probably one of the hardest ones and a tough nut to crack for sure. So I'd love to hear from some of the other music directors here about what kinds of practical and spiritual considerations that you're having to kind of newly consider in these COVID times. Heinrich, do you have anything in particular to add?
I certainly do, and I think I saw Mark Nelson on here, and he and I just had a long conversation about all of this about a week ago, that he is using the a cappella app to create music for his church, and he actually just went out and got an iPad that can sort of circle around, just as you were saying, Alison. Sometimes the equipment is the sort of the major challenge that, you know, one thing is figuring out how to record yourself, but before you can even get that far, you need something to record yourself. In the case of this particular app, it has to be an Apple product. So he went out and got a whole bunch of earphones and then one iPad that can just sort of travel from choir member to choir member.
Wow.
With proper sanitation in between. So people that don't actually own an Apple product can participate. And so, you know, and I certainly have struggled with all of this, right? That we have a couple of choir members that either are not keen to embrace, you know, you know, record for any number of reasons, part of them being the equipment, but also, you know, depending on the space you live in, it might not be a comfortable thing to, you know, sing full voice, what will the neighbors say? And you know, and one person said it's just too noisy with traffic, and you know, you can hear the neighbors through the walls. So getting just that little, you know, even if it's only 3 minutes of peace and quiet, that can really be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Heinrich related what I said very accurately, I think. I just will say that there are congregations love to see people that they know singing. Using the a cappella app or these other things, I'm not sure. It's such a different way of making music. And but people who are doing it often really love doing it because it's the only thing they can do. And so, you know, I think in my mind, the quality issues or the, you know, the musical fulfillment, I just don't worry about it anymore because I know that people who are doing it, that's an out for them that they can't find any other place.
Yeah, I've been telling everybody, don't worry about being perfect. You know, we do a lot of that, and you know, and it's been certainly a journey for me to try to let go of that, because that's what we're trained to do. We always strive for perfection. We never really get there, but that's always our goal. And in this situation, I tell people, like we did this Handel anthem a couple of weeks ago, and people would send me the videos like, can you use this? Because I took a breath here and I don't know if it's any good. And I said, don't worry about it. Now is not the time to worry about being perfect. We just want to offer what we can in this situation. And, you know, everybody's learning on the job. And I think it's a sort of a different, I don't even know how to quite put words on it, but it feels like we're trying to offer the same thing with such different parameters that there are just a whole new set of pros and cons that are involved. And one of them, I think, is just letting go of that, of the aspiration level. Just try to do the best we can in the situation, which to a certain extent is what the whole world is trying to do right now.
Yeah, it's true. I think, you know, as a musician, you hear there's so many recordings of things available online, and, you know, you sometimes stop and forget that those recordings have, you know, took how many takes to make perfect, right? It's really a conglomeration of so many recordings. And when we're doing a whole new service every week, it's like, you know, we want it to still feel authentic, right? I mean, it's very different from a studio recording situation for sure. But speaking of studio recordings, this is my personal setup. I do have a little tripod there, and the camera I use is simply my iPhone, which I was surprised to see in a couple of churches that were live streaming their masses. These were Catholic churches. They were simply using the various staff persons' iPhones to stream and getting wonderful quality out of it. That little red circle up the top is my recorder. And my piano is actually an electric hybrid piano. And so the green, which you can't really see, has a USB port. So I can record directly to that, kind of lay down the accompaniment first, and then I can sing over that track. So that kind of makes for fewer errors than if I was trying to sing and play simultaneously. So that's my toolkit. In terms of engineering recordings, I use a program called Premiere Pro, which is It's a pretty serious tool, and I definitely only know about 5% of it, but I know enough. And what I thought might be interesting would be to share two examples of music selections that I sound engineered for our King's Chapel services, and kind of talk about what we feel like worked or didn't work in terms of, how does it work in this kind of new worship from home setting. Um, and so the first I thought we would look at is a Renaissance motet by Gregor Eichinger, the Factus est Repente, which we premiered, if you will, on Pentecost Sunday. So this text is all about that rushing wind theme, and it was actually, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, our first foray into four-part singing in the time of COVID. And Heinrich let me pick this piece. And so I think, since we know that audio is notoriously bad on Zoom, what I'll do is I will put the link in the chat, and if you could kindly mute yourself and just take a moment to listen, and we'll listen for about 30 seconds or a minute or so, and then we'll kind of call everyone back together. So this will bring you right to the spot in the service. So just make sure you mute yourself and give you a minute. Okay, I think that's probably enough there. So if you could all stop it there. Did everyone get it to work okay? Yeah, so
I
there's a
didn't hear
little...
a thing. I don't know.
I
It
couldn't
works
hear a
back?
thing.
Oh.
You weren't
Nothing.
able to hear it either? Oh
Couldn't hear a
no.
thing.
Oh.
I'm trying to find it on my phone now, so that maybe it'll make a difference. I don't know.
Okay,
I just found that it was soft. I kind of had to turn up my earbuds, but it was there, and I knew the piece, so I kind of had an advantage there.
okay. Well, for those who could hear it, I'd be curious to kind of get your thoughts listening to it, in your in-home experience.
It sounded like you were together. It sounded like you were coming from one place. It was beautiful, the way the voices came together.
I've been afraid exactly to
Engineering.
I've been afraid to try polyphony. I don't know why I'm getting this echo. It's terrible. I'm gonna stop talking till I figure it out. So ignore me.
Okay. Yeah, but Jennifer does allude to it was very difficult to get it to sound together. One thing we learned in this particular recording that has definitely been helpful going forward is we didn't actually have a conductor for this. When you sing this kind of music in person with, 4 professional level singers, you typically would not use a conductor for it. And it wasn't until I got everyone's files together and sat down to engineer it that I realized that, oh, this music really depends on having people be in the same room to work. So that's something that I think we've since learned and rectified. We now have actual video of Heinrich conducting, so that helps a lot, I think. And just to kind of share what this looked like on our recording end. So this is a part of the score, fairly straightforward as far as Renaissance music goes. But this is what it looked like, just a small portion of the screen with all the different tracks, and you can see these kind of lines here, which was where I had to kind of cut and steal time, or maybe make someone's section a little bit longer so that it would actually all line up correctly. In some cases, taking little snippets of things out So it probably took me about 4 hours to engineer this 3-minute piece. So that was, a lesson learned for sure. Now for a second example, we have a setting of Psalm 23 that we did for Good Shepherd Sunday early in May. So I'm going to give you that link to try here. Stop screen sharing. There we go. That second link there in your chat, if you want to mute yourself, and I'll convene us again in a minute. Okay, I think we can reconvene. What are folks' reactions to that?
So I'll give an overall reaction. As Alison said, we've been progressing in our skill sets. I find that, the first time you ask somebody to do a video or audio, it sort of usually has all kinds of beginner issues, like the coordination thing certainly being one. And it makes you realize that, as Alison said, when you're together in person, we're all continually just adjusting to each other without even thinking about it. Whereas that's much harder when you're partly on your own and you're listening to the click track. But, I have a couple of people who say it's really hard to find the right balance between how much can you hear the click track versus hearing yourself and making sure that you're in tune and, all of the things that singers have to worry about in the normal course of singing, right? How do you marry the two? So I definitely think there's a learning curve with all of those things. Also things like, if you're making a video, don't put the music in front of your face because then nobody can see your face. All those kinds of things. And one of the really gratifying things early on for me was to see projects like Alison's multi-tracking herself. In a funny way, it's a more of a consistent kind of thing when people are making music with themselves, because you have sort of the same sensibility going in. Whereas I often liken, if you're making virtual music, it's a little bit like Mad Libs. You make your video, you send it out into the world, and then you wait to see what other story other people decide to tell with this, because there's just so many things that normally we would convey by being together in person that you just can't put it all in an email. So you have to just hope for the best and hope that you were sort of on similar sensibility wavelength to begin with. And Alison has done some wonderful things, and Dan Perry has multi-tracked himself in a cappella, which I think just works really beautifully because he agrees with himself about how it should be done, right? And so you take some of the multi-level out of it when you make music with yourself. But of course, that's not what we set out to do in the first place. So finding that balance is sort of an ongoing process.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like what works about a piece like this, as opposed to the last one, when you're worshiping at home, you're in this much more intimate setting, right? And so this is a piece that's scored simply for solo voice and piano. And in fact, it's almost like you're having this one-on-one conversation with the Lord, right? A very different experience than when you're worshiping in a huge physical group of people. And I actually wrote this piece in February for a friend of mine who was having surgery, and it's his favorite psalm, so I said it. And it was never, meant to be used in a service, at least not a traditional service. And so when COVID happened and Heinrich approached me about contributing music for Good Shepherd Sunday, I kind of revisited it. So I think it worked much better from this kind of at-home worship perspective. So, I mean, the choice of music is definitely important, but also your engineering choices, right? So there's all sorts of different things that you can do engineering-wise that will change how you encounter the piece. You can choose to add a lot of reverb or not. You can kind of play with the tempo after the fact. Where you place the mic makes a real difference, and then kind of setting those audio levels later, and what kind of visuals you choose to use. Even if you are using video of everyone singing, I've noticed a lot of groups who are recording their singers physically distanced may ask all their singers to wear the same outfit or to be in kind of like a similar looking space, like similar backdrop behind them, that sort of thing. Whether or not you choose to use subtitles so these are, I mean, all choices that I think really kind of impact how you encounter the piece. So like that last piece, the Psalm 23, for example, I kept the piano part pretty bassy and in your face in a way to kind of make it have a little more grounded feeling, so the voice could just kind of float over the top. And as kind of another example of engineering choices, I was listening to a pre-recorded performance that a Baroque ensemble did. They had members of their choir singing, I think it was the Bach B minor Mass, and it was very clear that, you know, they had all recorded from their homes, but they put a ton of reverb on it, almost as though they were singing in a church, and it just felt it was just such a juxtaposition of the setting they were clearly in and the sound that it was kind of disconcerting, and I personally didn't care for it. But you know, those are all choices that you can make in the setting that that impact how you experience the piece. So I thought I would open this up now to conversation. It is 12:30 if anyone needs to leave. But I would love to kind of hear about how your music listening habits have changed or not changed in the time of COVID. You know, what are you listening to in general these days when you're home? And I'm also curious to hear more about your kind of sacred space that you've kind of carved out in your home, and what kinds of music are there, or what kinds of music are you bringing into it? And so I think I'll just kind of open up the floor to that conversation and to any questions that you might have.
Don't all speak at once.
Carol,
Carol?
yeah.
I find I'm walking outside a lot, so I'm using ear pods and listening to music while I'm walking, which I never did before.
Yeah. Sylvia.
Sylvia?
I find that I need to escape from my eternal and all the time news listening. I'm addicted to WBUR, and it's been so horrible that I've I've resorted to music again. And I like listening to the radio, but I also put in things that I never have before so much. You know, I'm going to forget his name, but pop stuff. I mean, good pop, some. And going back to listening to long works, you mentioned the B minor Mass. So I've had it going all the time. It's one of the sexiest pieces I've ever sung, actually. So that's part of what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Is everything at King's done virtually?
Currently, yes.
Okay.
Well, I can't speak for the 9 a.m. Doesn't anyone do the Zoom service can speak to what music we aren't using for that?
Yeah, so I think as of last Sunday, Skip is now back. And so
Oh,
he's providing live music through Zoom, right? And so as David always said, it's a joyful noise. The whole point of really any music any of us transmit over Zoom is more having that interactive aspect, because it's not going to sound so great, as we've all learned.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's using different equipment, everything. Are they all in tune or are some off? I mean, does the digital stuff, is it all like auto-tune so everybody's matches, or how does that work? Because I mean, even sitting in a cathedral, stuff gets out of tune, bouncing around from the walls. I mean, what happens with all this electronic stuff? Is that a problem?
Well, my own experience has been like it's always good to tell people up front before they record, try to be in as dry a place as possible, because it's much more easy. It's easier to manipulate a dry sound after the fact than if you have one singer get back to you and it sounds like they've recorded in their bathroom, in the bathtub or whatever, then you kind of have to match everyone else to that. It's really hard to take reverb away after the fact. Pitch-wise, these audio files tend to not, compress to such an extent that the pitch gets affected. So as long as the singer is singing in tune, that's what you'll get back. So, but yeah, it's amazing. Some of these programs are you can, change pitch, and I've purposely done that sometimes. Like I sometimes play Baroque flute, and which is pitched half a step lower than the modern C flute. So like one time Heinrich had recorded something, I think it was on the organ in the little chapel, right? And I fed it through my system, and that's pitched in C 440. And then I fed it through my player and brought it down half a step so I could play my Baroque flute with it.
Can I say something? Hello,
Sure,
everyone.
yeah.
I kind of hear a lot about this because Heinrich is like in the other room right now in the condo, but and I hear what he's doing. But for me, this makes me realize how much I miss live music. I miss going to the services. I miss hearing live music. And what I've been doing for my music enjoyment, I grew up in Chicago. I've been listening to a lot of recordings of Sir George Schulte with the Chicago Symphony, because it's just nostalgic for what I grew up with. I often, just because I know it drives Heinrich crazy, I'll put a Bruckner symphony on. He hates Bruckner symphonies. Just kidding. But I love Bruckner symphonies. But I do miss, in a way, at Easter, because there wasn't church, I put on Bach's St. Matthew Passion. And that was church for me. So it's interesting how it's changed for me.
Yeah, definitely.
I need live music, and
Me too.
but
One of the good things about the way the Basilica is making music, we pre-record liturgy on Thursdays and broadcast it on the weekend. And of course, we also have live services throughout the weekend. And one good thing is, since during a live service, the congregation is not to participate in responsorial psalm or the liturgy of the Eucharist responses, we do that, of course, on the pre-recorded liturgy. And I've had people come up to me and say, are we ever going to sing that Holy, Holy that you sing on YouTube? Are we ever going to do that at church? And I said, no, we're not. That's the whole point. I said, but thank you very much, because I arranged that a new Eucharistic setting. And it's like, oh, good to know that's hitting the spot for some people, and that when we go back to singing in some capacity, that's going to be a positive experience for some people. It's kind of nice to hear.
It's like they've already learned it right at home. It's kind of a safe space to try something out.
Yeah, and the other challenge or benefit of the way we're doing things at the Basilica is the challenge is that there are two different liturgies that I have to prepare each week. One is almost a normal liturgy being video recorded, and the other is the adjusted liturgy being live. And so that's two different things I have to prepare. And the benefit is you can get away with a lot more. You can get away with shortening some hymns when we do it on YouTube, and when we do it live, you can, because there's no participation, we can do hymns that normally we don't do because in the Basilica it's too difficult for the congregation to participate in. Some hymns that are just a little too complex, we can do live now because you're not supposed to participate anyway. So it's a different challenge at the Basilica than with a tiny place like King's.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean tiny. I meant it's got a very
no,
big spirit.
yeah, it's a very, very different acoustic world for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Ray, yeah, I think you're on mute.
Ray, you're muted.
Unmute yourself, Ray.
Probably nobody ever says that.
There you go.
There we go.
Picking up on something Heinrich said earlier about not worrying about if something is perfect or not, with the caveat of not letting our standards slip too much, there is, I think, just the joy of hearing and making music together, just to hear your friends or your colleagues or whatever doing something and making this contribution to the whole. I think that in itself will forgive any mistakes, but we just have to be careful not to let those become too frequent.
Yeah.
But I appreciate all the efforts that are being made from so many people, and so.
I definitely think from my part, there's a conscious effort to try to pick pieces that are not too long and that are, quote unquote, easy enough that people can do them at least somewhat successfully in one take by themselves and not be, and discouraged by, how hard it is. Because every time I sit down to record something, I always make mistakes. And if I try to do it again, I'll make a different mistake. So that's what I mean by letting go of all of that. Don't worry about it, because now is not the time to freak out about it. One of these days we'll have real audio engineers again, and we can do 3 takes and they can patch it together. So poor Alison doesn't have to spend 4 hours trying to fix my wrong notes, all right? Any other questions, comments from the floor? All right, I think I should let you all get back to your busy days. Alison, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Alison.
Your perspective, and I hope to see you all soon.
Yeah,
Thanks
take
so
care,
much.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for coming.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Alison.